We're live on YouTube, and now we are live on Twitter Live. Okay, Rosebuds, welcome back to the program. Welcome to the Hell of Roses, where we come once again to celebrate our independent policy movement for progress, to bring power to the people. With us today, we have on Amanda Siebe. Amanda is running for Oregon's 1st District for Congress. Amanda, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, John.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to being able to chat with you today. I was really excited to be able to see your platform when I was going through a bunch of candidates, and I thought it was such an interesting dynamic where I had multiple candidates in the same race that I really loved, and I've loved seeing you all work together. So I wanted to be able to talk with you all, hopefully, as you are gearing up for these final days of the race ahead, the primary being on May 19th. So I wanted to hear from you, Amanda. What was your inspiration for getting involved in this cycle to be able to run for Congress?
I mean, honestly, I didn't think that politics was really something that I was going to be able to get into. I was raised in a family that believed that the closest a woman should come to politics was as a politician's wife. So it was like getting into politics in the first place was a huge hurdle for me. But when I saw Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, when I saw Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, Rashida Tlaib get in there, I realized that anybody could do it, that my wheelchair didn't have to be a liability, that it could be an asset. When I saw Suzanne Bonamici's stances on disability rights and opiate pain management, I knew that that was the seat I really wanted to go after because that was the seat that I could make the most change in.
So in your opinion, what made that the seat that you could make the most change in? What led you to believe that you needed to go for the federal seat first?
Well, I mean, it came down to policy. I mean, I figure that I can do the most and have the most platform and the most voice for disability rights working in the healthcare and working on healthcare reform and ensuring that across the country that we have somebody advocating in for the United States House of Representatives for disabled women.
Yeah, I think that is very true. There's definitely a lot more that can be done on a funding level baseline, which most members of Congress can actually do rather quickly in their first few terms, is just focus on the funding before these big bills. So I wanted to ask you, in your experience going through this campaigning season, what's that been like being someone disabled running for Congress? Have you had, unique conversations about that factor alone? Like most people, you see are in Congress right now are able people. What's that experience been like? Has it been challenging or enlightening in any way?
I mean, it's been amazing. It's been incredibly enlightening. It proves how much disability rights and disability issues affect every community, every family. Every single person that I talked to pretty much had a family member, a friend, a relative that had a disability, lived with the stigmatism, lived on the obscene and barbaric programs that we are forced to live on with the starvation wages. And so everybody could relate and they understood the need for change. And they understood that if you make change for the disabled community, you make change across the board, that we all get an improved quality of life because disability doesn't discriminate. It affects all of us. We all get old, we all get sick.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So I wanted to hear a little bit more about your district in general. Obviously, you're running for this national seat, but what are some of the issues that your district is facing specifically that it needs assistance from the federal level?
I mean, we deal with a lot of small family farms here. We have a lot of a major part of our district is small or small rural areas, and they have real needs. We have a lot of benefits that are going to the big corporations, the big factory farms, and those need to be redirected to the small businesses and the small family farms. That's the way that we lift people up. That's the way that we ensure that the small businesses keep going, is that we redirect those tax credits that are currently going to the big corporations back down to the mom and pop shops.
Yeah, I think that's been evident, especially during this time of the coronavirus, and how that's really, exacerbated the devastation on main streets, because they've been the ones getting shut down. And, they even bring up these programs like the PPP, but the funds are not getting to them with so many technical errors and stuff. What's your experience been like campaigning in this time period, during the coronavirus? You're not getting as much face-to-face time. So how have you been like adapting so far to that?
I mean, I had to come up with creative ways to canvas to begin with. It's really hard to go door knocking and everything when you have a wheelchair and a service dog. So, I mean, every house that we have around here has at least one step going up to it. So door knocking is incredibly challenging. So, I mean, before the coronavirus, I was going and making public transportation, turning max rides into town halls and bus rides into mini town halls so that people could really get a chance to interact who don't normally get a chance to talk to a politician and get their ideas and their problems across. Since then, I've been moving it all online like everybody else. That's the way that we have to do it now, and which is awesome. I mean, I have a really amazing group of people that have been warriors online, making sure that disability rights and making sure that we're getting the issues out there. But I mean, we're doing what we've always been doing, which is just keep going. So.
Yeah, no, I certainly understand that. What has been some of your approaches to how you've actually tried to market online or organize online? How do you think leaders in this like 21st century can actually be organizers on that front compared to the traditional campaigns, which is that door knocking effort? Has it been an interesting experience trying to adapt in that way? Or was it natural the whole way?
I mean, for me, I think it's kind of natural the whole way. I try really hard to get down into the groups to make sure that the people are doing all right and that they're all surviving. And I think that rings across true to all the progressives, that we take the fight to the people, that we make sure that their interests are being represented, that we're communicating with them as much as we can. And I think that we're all doing the same thing, which is working as much as we can with as many people as we can on the grassroots, on the ground level, so that we can have that force behind us when we get into Congress so that we can make the change we need to get.
Okay. So when you've been talking to them during these times, what are some of like the top concerns that are at their minds that you've been hearing and have been needing to be able to provide help? And what are some of those solutions that you're hoping that once elected, you can actually wield that power to hopefully drive more change than what you can do from just the outside right now?
Yeah, finances and food are two of the biggest issues that I'm hearing about right now. People are worried how they're going to pay their rent, how they're going to keep their family going, how they're going to make their bills, how they're going to get the food that they need to feed their family. So what we really need right now, this $1,200 is too little, too late. How many of us haven't even got it? I haven't received my $1,200 stimulus. So many of us haven't. And we need to ensure that we have a monthly stimulus coming in. $1,200 wasn't enough to begin with. It should be up over $2,000. That's what I personally believe. I believe that $2,000 should be the floor level of what we're living with, because we know that the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment is $1,400. So we have to make sure that we're giving people enough to live and to pay their bills so that we can ensure everybody is moving forward and surviving right now. We also need to ensure that everybody has health care. If we had had health care beforehand, we wouldn't have so many people living with pre-existing conditions and untreated illnesses that make them in higher risk categories for the coronavirus. It's about 1 in 3 that are in a high risk category right now. It's ridiculous. And part of that comes from the lack of health care. So, I mean, those are some of the major changes that I really want to get into when I get into Congress, is ensure that people have the health care that we need, to ensure that people have the housing that we need so that we can live. We have 554,000 people on our streets right now, and they're struggling, trying to make ends meet, and they're going around, and they're all exposed. They're all living in dire situations. They don't have what they need to isolate, to take care of themselves, and they're being left behind, and it's not right. We need to be taking care of everybody in our society.
Yeah, I strongly agree with you there. I think it's been a very enlightening time, as devastating as it's been, is seeing some of the priorities of this country, seeing what's truly essential. And it must be difficult to see that these people aren't even getting the true living wages that they need. There's that economic stress on top of that burden they're already facing. What's been some of the top priorities that you're hoping to accomplish when in Congress? And hopefully, by the time you'd be elected, hopefully we're a little bit more past this crisis. So, what are some of the crises that you've been trying to tackle that go beyond just coronavirus currently?
I mean, I would really like to see a federal jobs guarantee. I think that everybody who can work and wants to work should be able to have a job that pays a living wage and has benefits, that every worker gets a vacation pay, they get sick leave, they get maternity or paternity leave, they get the benefits that they need to not only work, live, but retire with dignity.
Yeah.
So I want to ensure that those programs are pushed forward, that we get a workers' bill of rights. I want to deal with the updating the ADA and ensure that those with disabilities are no longer left out of our society. I mean, we still have major parts of our country that are inaccessible to those in wheelchairs. And it's wrong. We are still allowing disabled people to be paid less than living wage or less than minimum wage just because they're disabled. I mean, there are some major changes that we need to update, and updating the ADA would provide protections for so many people. So those are definitely 2 or 3 big priorities. The Green New Deal is obviously one that we need to address, and we need to address it quickly. I mean, every year that we put it off is another year that it must become more radical to deal with the added impact of human impacted climate change. So.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you in terms of those priorities. First, the one you speak to obviously comes from personal experience, but the one about the jobs guarantee and the Green New Deal is totally an understandable crisis that is, they're talking about flattening the curve now, but there's going to be significantly more displacement if we keep ignoring that crisis that's on the horizon. I wanted to ask you, in terms of like a jobs guarantee, why that instead of just a jobs program? Why do you think we need to go to the step of a guarantee?
I think that it would add so many protections to workers, that we can ensure that workers have those living rights and living benefits that they need, that it provides those opportunities for private industries to catch up to where they should be. If we have a federal jobs guarantee, that ensures that anybody who wants a job, needs a job, has a job. And I think that's where we get to, is that we cover everybody across the board and not just focus on small areas. When we do programs, it only covers a limited scope of people. And we know that a majority of people need help right now. And a limited program isn't going to be anywhere good enough.
So I'd be curious in administering this type of a program, because I think that is kind of like at the heart of what the Green New Deal is as well. Obviously, there are other restrictions, but that's kind of like the main funding source that kind of bloats up what the cost is of what's reported, is they want to provide jobs. So what does that look like? How is that administered? Like, who decides where these jobs are located? How does someone like get this job and be productive at this job? Like, what skill sets are you looking for in this type of a jobs guarantee?
I mean, I think that every job we'd be able to focus on things like healthcare. We'd be able to focus on things like providing caregiving. We'd be able to focus on childcare, ensuring that all of our children are cared for so that parents can go to work. The great thing about being in this position is that I'm going to have access to people a lot smarter than me, who are going to have a lot of solutions to some of these big questions. And while we're still working out some of the technical aspects, it provides so many opportunities. And we know that with modern monetary theory that it is possible.
Yeah, I've certainly heard that recounting. So how do we get something like this across the finish line? Like, obviously, there's a lot of this coalition that's built on the progressive movement, but we have been seeing some pushback from groups like on the more centrist side of the party, the Blue Dogs, the New Deal Democrats, and then we also have our Republican allies. How do you think we can actually be trying to get some of these things across the finish line if you are elected to, Congress?
I mean, I think it's about organizing the people, showing the people that this is what we need, what the benefits are, what the impact would be, and showing them that it's not going to cost jobs, it's going to create jobs and provide dignity to everyone, so that we can put the pressure on the representatives, because the power is with the people. Once you convince the people that this is the right thing you can do, then convincing Congress is much easier.
I mean, I certainly agree with you that it does help. But I mean, I've seen studies like that Represent Us has presented out of like Northwestern that basically says, regardless of the popularity of a proposal, Congress right now is only 30% likely to pass that bill. They're not necessarily always aligned with the people. We see like these common sense proposals like universal background checks for guns, or getting money out of politics, but like they're not acting. So how do you think you can act from the inside to start getting them a little bit more responsive to people?
I mean, a lot of that is going to be voting out all the old establishment people that have been in there so long, that have been corrupting the process. It's going to be ensuring that we have publicly funded elections, and ensuring that we have term limits, and getting people in there who are accountable to the people and not accountable to the corporations, aren't accountable to the NRA, that aren't owned by all these lobbyists. We need people that are in there truly representing the people, because you're right, we do have massive support and major support for a lot of issues. But as long as we have politicians in Congress that are representing their interests over our interests, then we won't get change no matter who's in Congress.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that. But my next question is kind of like, in terms of just your general leadership style, like there's so many aspects to being a representative, from thought leader to challenging people who are not agreeing with legislation to writing legislation. What do you see as your general leadership style that you would want to focus on while having your team do most of the support in some of the other areas? What do you think your main focus would be as a legislator?
I think I lead by challenging. I think that I am all about finding solutions and finding ways that we can work together while driving the fact that we have to get this accomplished. That it's about the results, it's about the people, and that we need to lead for the people, by the people. And that's the only way things are going to get accomplished. If we continue to have these people, again, that are represented and loyal to the big money and the big industries, then we're not going to get change.
Yeah, I certainly hear you. So then, in my mind, how do we figure out when we have someone that's not aligned with us in this regard? Like, obviously, you're challenging Suzanne Bonamici because she is, in your mind, not suitable for that office. How do you evaluate candidates and knowing if they're doing a good job or not for you?
I mean, one of the first ways I looked at Suzanne Bonamici when I decided to challenge her was, who owned her? Where does her money come from? She's worth over almost $7 million now, and she doesn't understand any of the problems that we're facing here down on the ground. I mean, we need people that truly get it. I mean, while she has had over $1 million in her reelection fund, less than 7% of it came from the people. I mean, most of it came from the big industries like Nike and Intel and Honeywell. And, we need people that are truly representative of the people, that are owned by the people, that, stand and fight for the people. The only reason that Suzanne Bonamici decided that she was going to fight for the Medicare for all was because she was shamed into it. And to me, that's not good enough. You shouldn't have to be shamed into fighting for a policy that the people want. You should be able to pick up that policy and run with it and make it happen for them.
Yeah, so I certainly hear you on the funding source thing being a very transparent issue. I wanted to expand on your second point of bringing out like issues like Medicare for all. Like, what would you say are some of those like more litmus test issues for you? Is there a one policy, two policy, three policy issue, or is it just a general approach of how they govern? How do you try to say this is beyond the pale that I need to step up and run?
I mean, there's a couple real big issues that you need to look at for me, healthcare is definitely a major one. whether or not you're full support for Medicare for all, covering all as a universal program, whether it's going to cover, the entire body, or whether we're going to just take the Oregon healthcare plan and extend it across all people. That's not good enough. The Green New Deal, whether you actually live and lead by example and put your money in your mouth, your time where your mouth is, those are huge impacts, and those are huge litmus tests for me. How you lead and how you live, that's what matters. And we need people that live and breathe this and live and breathe change, rather than just placate people for the sake of staying in power.
Okay. And so the last question I wanted to ask before I turn over the time to the audience for any questions they have is, you're in this final kind of a little bit more than a week. I think actually it's a little under a week now by the time we're recording. So 6 days. What's your strategy down the home stretch of what you're doing to try and, finalize this victory over Bonamici? I know you're not the only candidate in the race. So what are you doing in these final last days to get yourself ahead?
I mean, I'm just going to keep doing what I have been doing, keep talking to the people as much as I can, make sure that people are getting out there and voting, which is the most important thing. I mean, like you said, no matter what, Heidi, Ricky, and I have decided that no matter which of us wins, that we're all going to work together. So the most important thing is that people vote, and they vote for change, because that's the only way we're going to get it. And I mean, to me, like I said, we need leaders that lead by example, and I put my money where my mouth is. And if it's Heidi that wins, then I'm going to do everything that I can to support her. If it's Ricky, I'll do everything that I can to support them. And, I know that they will do the exact same for me. And that's what change and that's what leadership are.
I hope that solidarity effort really shines through to people understanding that Bonamici isn't the acceptable option. I have my concerns just about the approach in general, just because I had ran myself, and the whole reason I dropped out was to not try and split the lane and support someone else. So I really hope your strategy pans out, because I think it really is a great list of candidates, yourself included today, Amanda. So, I want to now open the floor to any of the questions that I've had from my audience so far. I'm going to just start with one that I got offline from someone who could not make it, but really wanted to get a question to you, because they're a really passionate disability activist, and they wanted to hear your opinion. So this comes from Mark Safman. He wanted to ask you, what do you think needs to be done specifically to help the disabled community, specifically the blind and deaf communities, be able to participate in our democracy more?
Yeah, I mean, those are huge issues that I have been learning more about as I've become a disabled activists. Obviously, they aren't issues that I have had to deal with, but I've been working with members of the community that have, and things that I've learned. We need more ASL translators. We need to offer more ASL classes. People need to be able to interact with each other, and when we leave entire swaths of our community out, it doesn't work. We need more adaptive devices, especially with public transportation. I mean, if you try to catch a bus as a blind person, it is incredibly difficult. I mean, they have no audio stops, no alerts saying when a bus is coming or which bus is coming. And I mean, it becomes a huge problem, and we are leaving these people out. We're leaving the entire community out, and it's wrong. So I really want to make sure that we're doing more to include that. We have books that are available in Braille at all the libraries, that we have material and resources and adaptive equipment that is available through Medicare for all, that we have the programs and the resources that people need to live inclusive lives.
Yeah, I think that's very important. I think one of the things that I've really appreciated from having Mark been a regular now follower asking these questions for all the candidates who want to participate is just, getting to hear one of our more vulnerable communities that just doesn't get a voice all the time. Because, we talk about like these class issues a lot, but there are these very specific issues that certain communities face more than others. And so I think it's a very important conversation. But what do you think are some of those other groups that have very like unique needs that you can't just have a universal type of policy be able to address appropriately?
I mean, I know when we talk about mental disability, and there's definitely issues that we need to take into consideration. I mean, many people that dealing with mental and emotional disability are fully functional, wonderful, amazing human beings that just need a slight help, to function, and others need a lot more help to stay at home and to function. And we need programs that are versatile and will respond to that. And I mean, there are not one size fits all for any community. And like every community, we all need to deal with individual aspects and make sure that we write legislation that takes that into account.
Okay, let's go to our next question. This one comes from the stream. This comes from Nelson Orta. His question is, are there any issues where you see yourself reaching across the political aisle to build consensus?
Off the top of my head, I mean, it's hard. I'm very firm in my beliefs. I believe that the issues that I stand for 100%. And there's not a whole lot of compromise. I'm going in there to fight for the people, and there are some issues that you cannot compromise on. I mean, for me, you cannot compromise on making Roe versus Wade law. You cannot compromise on getting the Green New Deal implemented. I mean, yes, there are different timeline issues, but the fact that we need it needs to happen. I mean, there are definitely different aspects that you can adjust on, but the issues and the principles, I don't think there's any compromising there.
So I hear on some of these issues that you don't want to compromise, and I think that's totally right. But what do you think are some things that maybe some of the Republican coalition can agree with you on your terms? What are some of those things that you would look to go to them about? Because obviously, we can only go so far with Democrats sometimes on people issues, so we need this somewhat of bipartisan action.
Right. I mean, a lot of the bipartisan and the compromise comes down to numbers issues. That's where a lot of the compromise needs to be done. When you look at issues from a Republican point of view, that's what it comes down to. It comes down to money. How do you pay for it? Where does the money come from? How do we do it without raising taxes? And that's where we need to work on the compromises, where they're willing to compromise and where we can compromise, which is a little bit on the money, and we can work on the numbers, and we can find ways to make solutions that work for everybody.
Yeah, I certainly hear you there. I'm curious to hear what you think the general vision is for the progressive movement in terms of coalition building. Obviously, we can look at like this election cycle from a primary sense and say we have, maybe 35% of the electorate right now. Where do you think we need to be looking to expand as a coalition?
I think we really need to be working on bringing more independence in. That there are so many independents that are just fed up with establishment politics in general, that if we can break away and show ourselves as being progressive and different and still wanting change, and bring those people in that are just sick of establishment politics, then we'll be able to grow our movement exponentially. I think that across the board, I mean, Bernie Sanders while he has been in office for so long, he's not really an establishment guy. I mean, Donald Trump, definitely not an establishment guy. Our people are crying out for a not establishment candidate, which is why it is so depressing to see Joe Biden up there as our presumptive nominee.
How do you expect to be handling that this fall? What do you think you would be recommending to people? Or do you think it's just everyone decide for themselves their alignment? What would you be doing in the fall in the Biden versus Trump race?
I mean, personally, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be voting green. Like I said, I don't compromise on my ideals and my principles. And I know that Joe Biden does not fight for what I'm fighting for, and I cannot vote for somebody that isn't fighting for me. And so I'm probably going to be voting green like I did in 2016. because Hillary Clinton didn't fight for me either. And that's the problem. We need candidates that are fighting for the people instead of people fighting for the candidates.
Yeah, I strongly agree with you there. And, you happen to be in a kind of similar dynamic to me. You're from, Oregon. This is a safe kind of blue area in general. I'm from New Jersey, same kind of district breakdown. So, I think both of us, our votes aren't going to swing the election to Trump. I tend to say that I'm going to be supporting the Green Party right now. How would you advise people who are in these kind of like swing district areas? Do you think that they should be swallowing it up to make sure that Biden beats Trump? Or do you think that they should also be voting for the Green Party at that time as well? Like the people Michigan, Wisconsin, Florida, those type of individuals.
I mean, in a lot of ways, I think it comes down to 4 more years of hell with Trump or 8 years of hell with Biden and 40 more years of establishment quo and status quo with Biden. So, I mean, it comes down to what people are okay with. I'm personally not okay with continuing on the status quo for another 40 years by electing establishment politician. I can't do it. And I personally couldn't ask anybody else to vote against their consciousness either. I just couldn't. That's not me.
I understand that. Okay, let's go with one more question before we wrap up to let people know how that they can support your campaign. This final question comes from Nelson again. I think this is a good one. It's 2021 and Medicare for All as a single payer has not succeeded yet in the Senate because that's where we have the most competition right now with the Republicans. However, the Senate passes Medicare for All as a public option. How would you vote on something like that?
I mean, I would definitely vote for it as a public option because right now we have 30 million people without insurance and we need to get something done. And I would have a really, really hard time sucking that up, but 30 million people with lives on the line. And I couldn't at that point let great be the, I mean, I would still be pushing for Medicare for All universal wholeheartedly and use the having a public option as a launching point for why we need to make it a universal option. And I would definitely have to support it. So because 30 million lives, you can't gamble with that.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you there. I really don't think you can be looking to have that level of impact to just put your foot in the ground ideologically. You have to help people first and foremost. And, we've been fighting for universal healthcare for now decades. If we finally get something that says everyone can get this guaranteed, even if it's not the same version as we'd like in the cost structure, you take that and then you keep fighting. You keep pushing the ball forward. So I agree. I like that pragmatic approach in general. Amanda, I wanted to thank you so much for speaking with me today. I think you have a very important perspective to share in terms of the community that you've represented from your own lived experience. And I think you're a really bold person in terms of you answer these tough questions very directly and straightforward. A lot of people who are running for like a Democratic seat might be a little afraid to that. So I want to commend your bravery in some of the answers here and the transparency of giving them. So thank you for that. How do you think people can help your campaign in these last 6 days? What do you want them to do? We have the homepage of your website, siebe2020.com down below, but what are you looking for them to be able to do in these last 6 days?
I mean, anybody who knows somebody in Oregon, get them out there, get them voting. Make sure you call them. Make sure you talk to them. Make sure that they turn their ballots in because that's the way that we do it now is that we get them voting and we get them voting for change.
Okay. Yeah, I strongly agree out there. Just be able to share her message after this via this video. Go to the website. Make sure that you signed up so that you know any volunteer opportunities in these last 6 days. And if you have the funds to be able to do so, these campaigns to be able to reach out to people, it's not free. So please give if you can. But Amanda, thank you so much for coming on today. I really enjoyed being able to talk with you.
Thank you so much for having me, John.
Yeah, very welcome. I look forward to being able to continue this conversation going forward. But for the Rosebuds, I just wanted to wrap up letting you know some of the updates we have for the rest of this week, as well as going into next week. So right now, as we've just done with Amanda and we had done with Michael Owens the day before, we're continuing our congressional interviews as we really heat up in this primary season. So tomorrow we have David Sandbeck from Minnesota's 4th District on the program. And then on Friday, we're going to have Jason Call from Washington's 6th District on. Then we have, I think it's Amanda Sake from Indiana's 1st is on Monday. And then we have more coming in Friday. We don't have the complete confirmed dates yet, but we have basically a full list of congressional candidates other than Wednesday, where we're going to be hosting a universal basic income debate. So we're looking forward to doing that as well. Thank you for tuning in for Amanda's interview here today. Amanda, thank you again for being on. And I hope you all are staying safe out there and that you're staying rosy.